still audio sounds terrible because of the water and the microphone, but it is working so well. Whoa! Oh, he almost got it!
What's up, Film Fam Jam? It's your boy, Zachramelan. In today's video, I'm gonna be talking about the DJI Osmo action camera. Now, this is DJI's, I would say knockoff version of GoPros, but I guess it's not knockoff because that means it's worse. It's actually like a really good camera, although it is easily to be mistaken for being a GoPro, and I call it a GoPro all the time. But I recently got my hand on one of these and I was completely blown away by the cinematic quality that it had. Now, for my first few weeks using it, I literally treated it like it was sort of an action camera GoPro type thing where I just sort of like stuck it on things and did the GoPro type thing. But this past week while being in Tofino, I really wanted to see how far it could go as far as like cinematic quality went. If I treated it like an actual cinema camera, could I get images that would be usable for perhaps something that was movie grade? And the results actually blew me away. So in this video, I'm gonna be talking about how I got an image that was super duper cinematic, blew me out of the water, and how you guys can get the same with your tiny little Osmo action camera. Now, it doesn't have to necessarily be the Osmo action. You guys could probably get a lot of this with your GoPro or even your cell phone. The vast majority of these tips and tricks has to go with sort of the technical add-ons, not necessarily the software that comes with the camera. So with all that being said, let's hop into it. I'm gonna break down a few things that I did for this last video, as well as how you guys can do the same. The first thing that you have to do actually goes with mindset, is to treat this like an actual cinema camera. Now, for the vast majority of the time that I was filming with it, I felt like a loser, because I was like, pretending this was like a big movie camera. You know, when you're shooting stuff, you do like the slow turn kind of thing. You're like, oh, this looks super cinematic. I was doing that with this thing.
It feels so dorky trying to be cinematic with this.
Like I was spinning around my buddy Zark, and like as I was shooting, I'm like, this is not cool. Why am I doing this? But if you treat your little camera, be that a cell phone or your GoPro or your DJI Osmo Action, the results is actually just ridiculous how good it ends up looking. So the first step is literally treat whatever camera you're using as a higher level camera, and you will get higher level shots as a result. The next big thing is the internal stabilization. Now, the latest version of GoPro cameras have this, and the DJI Osmo Action has this. The stabilization on this was unbelievable, and the thing that you should really put into play is understanding how stable the shots can be. And what I ended up doing was treating this also like it was a gimbal. So not only was I treating this like it was a cinema camera, I was also treating it like it was a gimbal or steady camera, and that way I was able to get these nice, long, sort of tracking shots along the beach, which gave me some really good footage. Now the first day, I'm like, oh, I'll just capture short, quick clips, because usually with any sort of camera, when you're doing handheld, you'll only be able to get 3-second long clips. But what I realized with this camera was the fact that I could do really long, like dolly style shots, and I didn't have to trim the clip any shorter because there wasn't any bumps, and I didn't have to remove any technical error. So in fact, this camera, I was able to pull out longer duration clips than what I would, let's say, with something like an SLR or even a cinema camera. This is one of the main qualities that just blew me away. And if I was able to even do that and then I shot it in slow motion, what you're able to get is absolutely super duper long footage that is incredibly useful the whole way through, which as an editor, that's all you're looking for. You're looking for shots that is gold the whole time, as opposed to trying to pull out little tiny snippets that may or may not work. But with that comes with a little bit of an error, and what I realized was when I slowed down the stabilized footage, I would get a little bit of like warping. I would be able to see the stabilizers within the footage. So if, let's say I shot at 60 frames per second, I slowed it down, I got a tiny bit of image warping. It doesn't bother me 100%, but the stabilization works the best. You're playing it at 24 frames per second, playing it in real speed, and then just doing those nice, long, drawn-out shots. And again, if you pretend that it is a gimbal, you're gonna get super duper buttery smooth shots. Now, the next thing is let's go into the camera settings on the camera. So when you open it up, the first thing that you're gonna get is on the right-hand side of the screen, there's gonna be some buttons to press, which is kind of like your settings. What I actually ended up doing was I set it into manual mode. That way the exposure wasn't constantly changing. And what I really wanted to get was that nice textured sky that was in the footage. So essentially I just put down the shutter enough so I could see that textured sky, and then I lower the ISO down to 100. And then basically I played around with the shutter and ISO while I was out in the water, which is crazy. Like I was literally touching this little touch screen with waves splashing on me, and it was ridiculous, and everything was working out beautifully.
And it's phenomenal.
As far as that video that you saw, I also shot all of that at 1080. None of it was at 4K. I think maybe 1 or 2 clips was at 2.7K, but like that was 100% 1080, mostly because my computer is crazy grandpa mode. It's going super duper slow, so I ended up having to like sacrifice image quality, potentially just for like workflow and speed. And I was totally satisfied with what the 1080 quality looked like. With that, the color space on this is phenomenal. I set it into the cinema style on this, and again, you can set your GoPro into that as well, basically just by going into settings, but I would highly recommend putting it into one of those modes because then you just have a little bit more room to play with in post-production. That is a perfect segue to take us over to the post-production side, which is where I was really blown away with what this thing could do. Now, when you put it into your editor, it will sort of look like that traditional action camera footage. There are a few things that you guys can do. First thing is if you did shoot it with sort of the full warpage on your screen, you guys can go and download, there's like a de-warping app that you can get from GoPro. It's a plugin that you could put into something like Premiere. Once you drag and drop that in, you can add the de-warpage, and that's what I did with some of the other footage that I shot that had the warp. But actually, while I was filming with this camera, I put it into no warp mode from the settings, and therefore I didn't have to do that in post. So that gets rid of that sort of like GoPro style and makes it more cinematic to begin with. For color grading this, I went in deep for it, and this is where you're going to really elevate the style and flavor of this, taking it from a lower end looking camera to a higher end. As you can see from A and B, there's a huge difference from the quality of image. And the first thing that I did was I put in a LUT from Triune Films color pack. There'll be a link to it in the description below. You guys can take a peek at that. And I used that as sort of a base layer LUT. And then I sort of started tweaking around with the colors. I played around with the tints and tones, and I'll do a more comprehensive video on my color grading process in another tutorial. But essentially I tinkered and toyed with it to get this sort of muted color look. Now, what really came to my advantage was I shot this at a nice overcast day, which lower end cameras love overcast. If you're like, oh man, what is the best time of day to shoot with my cell phone or with my GoPro or my DJI Osmo Action? Shoot it when it's nice and cloudy, textury, because you're really gonna elevate that production value just by shooting at a good time of day. And I always find overcast, not sunny, not too dark times of day perfect for this stuff. And then, you know, I threw in a score, put in a 2:3:5 aspect ratio, slowed down some footage, added some scale ins, and that was about it. That is how I was able to elevate my footage. Again, the DJI Osmo Action camera, I have really been blown away by this machine. Again, a lot of the functions, a lot of the features and functionality is very similar to the latest GoPro, like 7 or 8 or 9 or whatever they have right now. That being said, the reason why I picked this one up as opposed to the GoPro was the fact that it had this front-facing camera screen monitor. This is the game changer. Literally, when you turn it on and you hold this button, it's gonna flip around the screen, and then you have it on this side, so you can like do selfie mode. And I was able to capture like cool like cinematic selfie shots of myself with this, and I knew what I was framing. So overall, this thing was so fun to play around with. Hopefully you guys gained a little bit of knowledge out of this and learned what you guys can do to apply to make this so much more cinematic. And to cap off this whole video, let's say you like what I'm talking about, you wanna learn a little bit more about filmmaking, I've created my own online film school called Pocket Film School alongside with my filmmaking team squad and 12 other teachers. Pocket Film School is kind of a one-stop shop film school that you can learn all aspects of filmmaking, from production design, editing, color grading, cinematography, directing, and producing, and a whole bunch of other things. We're continually expanding that library of content. If you guys are interested in expanding your cinematic brain and taking the knowledge that I've learned over the last almost decade of filmmaking and distilling it into 9 hours, I recommend taking a look at that. Sign up is now open. You plug in your little email, you get some information about it. And yeah, I'm so excited for you guys to see it. It's like, I've been working on this for like a year with my squad, and I'm super happy with how it turned out. I'm gonna go hit up the water, go surfing a little bit more, play around with this little camera just a teeny tiny bit further, and yeah, let me know what you think of the footage. And do you like this more than the GoPro 7, 8, 6? I don't know what the GoPro is at, but this is a good camera. And it's not about the camera, it's how you use it. That's a good line to end this video off on. I'll cut to black on that.